So I'm going to give a little background on myself, as people tend to do at the start of a session like this. But before I do, I'd actually love to hear from all of you, 30 seconds or less, some context on your business, less the pitch. I know you're all founders, so you want to pitch me on your thing, and more the context of the organization. How many people we're talking about hiring? So what's the hiring plan look like? And some basic information like that. Let's just be okay and comfortable with the fact that on Zoom people talk over each other sometimes. So rather than try and over design this, anyone who feels like it can kick us off.
I'll go ahead and start. My name is Tandis. I'm the co-founder of a company called The Lambie. We are designing a primary care members club. We're two co-founders right now. Our next hire is our chief medical officer. And it's a really, really funny time to try to hire a doctor right now. And we've raised a small pre-seed round. We are looking to raise our seed round in the fall and launch a brick and mortar space, hopefully in the next 14 to 18 months.
Thank you.
My name's Cameron, co-founder of a company called WeStock. We let consumers vote on the products that they want to see at their local stores. We've got about 5 full-time employees, 1 part-time designer, and our next 2 hires is going to be a 3rd sales director and an operations manager.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll go. I'm Brandon, co-founder and CEO of Sneakerhood. We're a mobile community for sneakerheads. We are 2 co-founders, and we have a chief experience officer that recently joined us within the past couple months, right before all this went down. And we have a roughly 10 to 12 person dev team out of the Philippines. That's really one head of product that's really streamlining that team.
Thank you. Matt, how about you?
Hey, I'm Matt, working on a tool that will help you with your personal relationships, basically a modern day version of Rolodex. We're a team of 5 based in New York, half remote, mostly all engineering. Our next 2 hires would probably be someone who has sort of like a community people background and a designer, a product designer.
Thank you. Yuri?
Hey folks, solo founder of a company called Puma Browser. We're building a privacy-focused browser with new payment methods built in. Remote first team, the only one in America. Others are in Canada and Eastern Europe. We are 7 people now, 1 designer, 1 growth, and everybody else is engineering. Looking to hire more on the full-time side. Right now, most people are on contracts, so looking to start hiring full-time on the design, growth, and engineering sides.
Cool, thank you. And Angela, are you there?
I'm here, just here to record.
Okay, cool. So, my turn. I am Jonathan Basker, and I, these days, am an organizational design consultant and leadership coach, but most of my early career was in recruiting specifically for startups, and for quite some time, specifically for really early stage organizations. I started as a headhunter and was the first recruiter hired full-time into Etsy when they were still pretty early on. And myself and a consultant who they converted to the other original recruiter there, took that company from, I think I was employee number 98 or 80 something. And then when I left, we were at about 250. And have, as a consultant since, taken a few other companies through that moment of big, fast, rapid post-product market fit growth. When I left Etsy, I went to Betaworks, which at the time was one of the first, studio model organizations, and was the VP of people there for about 2.5 years, which is probably more relevant to the stage of organization that I hear all of you at. Very early stage, in some cases hiring founders, co-founders, and building founding teams. And since, I've spent a lot of my time supporting and consulting with organizations that run the gamut through all those sizes and moments. I'm going to try and tailor everything today to things that I think will be tactically helpful when you're hiring your first person to your first 20 people. I'm only going to talk with prepared remarks for a few minutes because I mostly actually just want to focus on giving you non-theoretical, helpful advice, guidance, or ideas for whatever you're actually experiencing right now. Because my guess is with 5 of you in this room, there are 5 different sets of needs or curiosities or problem sets. And if I just talk in generalities, if I do a great job, then you'll say, wow, that was really interesting. And you'll wake up tomorrow, go out to recruit and be like, wait, what do I actually do again? And it won't actually do much. So I prefer to keep mostly to the Q&A and interactive part. Does that work for you guys? I'm going to talk at you for about 5 minutes and then we'll move out of that mode. Cool. I mean, the first thing I'll say is there is no way in half an hour that I'll be able to give you everything you need. And so when I was thinking about preparing for this, I just thought about what are the things I can share that I think are very important and frequently not discussed enough that I want to add to the mix of conversation, as opposed to giving you a complete roadmap. In other words, anything that you can get off of a Medium post in 5 minutes, I've tried to avoid here. But of course, in your questions, ask me whatever you want. So here really quickly are the things that I think are most important categorically when you're hiring this early in an organization's life cycle. Number one, the most important thing is to spend time intentionally crafting your narrative about the business. The story you tell when you go out and try and hire somebody. This sounds so obvious, and so people generally can either kind of like yeah it, or just think they've got it and they move past it. Especially people that have already gone out and built a pitch deck for investors, or spent so much time at different parties, like repeating again and again, we're a SaaS platform for blah blah blah. We're a SaaS platform for blah blah blah. This is different. This is about kind of a spiritual, emotional journey that you intend to go on, that you're asking somebody else to tie a good chunk of their life to. So they need to be able to emotionally connect to it. And it's okay if you have more than one version of this narrative. It's okay for different people in your organization to want to work there for different reasons, but it has to be aligned with the things that you care about and where you want to go. And not only does this cause problems down the line when someone realizes that they joined a place that's not actually lined up with what they want to do, who they want to be, how they want to operate, it's also really hard to convince someone to take a massive risk to join your very, very early stage organization if they can't get truly kind of existentially excited about it. So when I was at Betaworks, I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the recruiting process understanding their narrative so that I knew how to tell them our story, or the story of any particular product or idea that we had. But ultimately, at least for my version of recruiting, especially at this early stage, any success I had was based on my ability to tell a good story that wasn't bullshit, and tell it in a way that was compelling enough to someone that they were willing to take an irrationally massive risk and come work on our thing that probably wasn't going to work out because there was some other great reason for them to want to do that. So craft your narrative, spend time on that. 2, once you have that narrative and you've given it to them, interview collaboratively. This is another one that I think doesn't get the attention it deserves. Frequently, most of us got trained by the interviews that we've received. And so we tend to sit there with our clipboard and we'll ask you a question and then we'll judge you on the answer. And it's very one way. And there's a lot of problems with that. One, it doesn't give you the chance to deepen that relationship. I mean, again, at this early stage, I'm going to just assume for most of you, you don't yet have a lot of brand recognition in market. You may or may not yet actually have a lot from the business to show success. Some of you may have exceptions for this. So a lot of this is actually just kismet and vibe and connection and trust and salesmanship. And one thing that will make that more possible for you is to try and treat this interview more like a mutual discovery process than a classic, my turn, then your turn, then my turn, then your turn interview. That's a trust building exercise. It's an experience of getting to know each other. It's showing your level of honesty with this person. It also can help you if you don't yet know exactly what you want in this role. The more that you're collaborating with this person on mutually discovering whether or not there's a fit, the more you get the side benefit of kind of getting a sense of what you like or don't like about this person, what you need or don't need in the job. Which would be my third point, which is know what you're looking for, or just know that you don't know yet. That's okay, but know that you do not yet know what you need. I've seen so many founders spend so much time on a quasi-fuzzy, we'll know it when we see it, but we believe we know what it looks like search, only to realize 6 months later they never had any clue what they were looking for. And if they had just known that and just said, I don't know what I'm looking for, the next 20 interviews are mostly going to be information gathering for me to figure out what I actually need here. So I mean, interviewing is a great opportunity, assuming you can get in front of the right people. You've got their explicit permission to interview them about their experience. So if all you know is you want someone who's going to work with your community, but you have no idea what good looks like, well, go interview 20 people that are supposedly good at it and see how much you can learn about what good looks like before you even try to decide who's going to be filling the role. So know what you want, or know that you don't know yet. Once you're at that point, you have a narrative, you have sort of this energy that you're bringing to these conversations that is collaborative, it is fair, it's more of a partnership, and you kind of know what you're looking for. Make sure you stop and actually design a process. You don't have to be maniacal about this, but if you're winging every single interview, you won't really know what your standard of measurement is, and you won't know when you've hit it or not. So take some time to sit down and decide, these are the things I'm looking for. This is why I'm looking for them. This is how I'm going to look for them. And on the how you look for them, you're generally going to want to stick to behavioral interviewing questions, looking at what someone has done in the past. There's a lot more you can say on that, but again, you can Google behavioral interviewing, and there's plenty of people that can explain that to you as well or better than I can. And then just recognize how much work this generally takes. I think there's a lot of people I've spoken with who think they're doing it wrong because of how much time they're spending. And so let me just tell you, no, it just generally takes a lot of time. Especially, again, at the very beginning, if you don't have much of a brand in market, if you don't have much of a network of people that already look, sound, act, behave, and are the way that you want this particular person to be in this particular role, you're going to have to put in a lot of work to go find them. So just settle into that. I talk about hiring at this stage a lot as brute force intelligently applied. And it's both. Just brute force will not work well. You can design your pristine interview process and it's great, but if no one's going to come and talk to you about it, it doesn't do anything. It's both. Brute force, intelligently applied. And that's it. I know that's really high level and fast, but after that, let's get out of the theory and actually just talk about what you're experiencing and how I can help.
Hey, I'll start. So I think for me, why I was interested in this is that so my last business was a service business, and I can find salespeople, and I know what makes a good salesperson. It's a lot of just conversation, a lot of what you talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I think expanding and actually building a product, it's a whole new type of person that I'm looking for. It's developers, and really I think ultimately like the real struggle I've had is finding somebody that can lead that conversation. So I got lucky in finding a dev shop run by a friend that's super, super cheap, and we're able to move forward. But I know that at some point we are going to want to build a team here in the US, potentially in New York. So I think that like that's my overall question is like, how do you find, like you said, those people that are outside of your network, and especially when you are at such an early stage level? I know that things like this, creating a broader network and all of that, you know, is part of the process. But
Mm-hmm.
are there other, I don't know, resources or something that are available that we should be thinking about to build a world-class team? I mean, we just heard how, the best operators or whatever typically come from, other successful businesses. But how are we able to find that or attract that, or, the general direction I'm heading in?
Yeah. So one thing that great recruiters are great at is having a nose for exactly what you're describing, the talent within the space that they recruit for. which is funny because generally those recruiters are not practitioners of those things. So you'll find that, really world-class engineering recruiting folks have never necessarily written a line of code in their life. So how are they doing that? Well, one, they have a massive data set, a sort of gut check of every single engineer they've ever met that's been tuning over the years. You won't have that on day one, but the first thing I would say is recognize that for the period of time that you're going to be the head of recruiting, let's say through your Series A, potentially through your Series B, it kind of depends on how the story of your company unfolds. If you care about the quality of the talent that's coming into your organization, and I would argue that you should, and I would argue that talent is a very local concept, and what you consider to be an amazing fit might not be universal, might not find agreement in a different organization. I would encourage you to do something that's there's some pragmatic limitations because you have other stuff to do, but spend as much time as you can getting to know the kinds of people that you are going to likely need to bring in within the next 12 months. Like always be, and if you can't do that within the next 6 months, always be staying ahead of your current needs so that by the time August rolls around and it's time to bring in a marketing person because you've raised your A and you now have the dollars to spend, you're not starting from square zero on what a good marketing person looks like. And you're not just starting to think about what your version of a good marketing person looks like. Are you looking for someone who's very quantitative and is a master of optimizing spend? Are you looking for a storyteller who's narrative driven, who is going to bring in a bunch of unearned eyeballs? Like, how is this going to work for you? So don't try and do something you couldn't possibly do right now, which is have a formed view on what good looks like. First, you got to go be able to form that view. In terms of the network, I think there's a pleasantly surprising number of people that are always happy to help someone who reaches out with a specific ask in a kind and clear way. Hey, you seem awesome. You actually seem exactly like the kind of person I'm going to need in about 8 months. I'm not there yet. Expect me to hit you up in 8 months and try as hard as I can to offer to hire you. But right now, could I beg 30 minutes just so I can get to know your journey? Because at some point in the year, I might need to hire this role, and I don't feel like I have a lot of clarity yet on what good looks like. But it seems like it looks like you. Can we chat? Just send that out to 50 people. 30 of them are going to say yes. 10 of those are going to be really illuminating. Does that help?
Cool. No, that's awesome. That's a great way of looking at it, because I think that I've been doing a lot more of that network expansion and trying to meet more people in these specific roles. But I think that that's a more specified way of approaching it, of just learning. I think that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll throw one more in for how to create a valuable network. And valuable just means valuable to you. And the first is don't look at people, but just in terms of their value, because it's gross. And I'm not saying I heard you say that, but people that run around power networking, it's just gross and it really turns people off. And especially people that are networked with all the time find it especially off-putting. One of the ways you can strengthen your existing network is to find areas of mutual benefit that have nothing to do with you and connect them. This is something worth thinking about. I know Cameron. Cameron has some cool ideas about marketing. I know Brandon. I know Brandon's looking for this right now. I'm going to connect them. And my network got stronger even though it didn't expand. And I became seen as a more valuable person even though I didn't really do anything. And so I would heavily encourage you to always kind of have an eye out for how you can help those around you, because being known as a helpful person not only feels great, but it tends to be very helpful 6 months from now when you can call Cameron and say, hey man, I'm looking for a CMO. Do you know anybody? What else are people experiencing? Like I said, my only goal in this is to try and be as tactical, specific, and hopefully helpful as possible.
Hey, Jonathan, I do have to hop off after this question actually, but I wanted to ask you, like, right now I'm looking for positions that are taking a lot off of my plate. And like, I don't want to just try to find like my qualities in somebody else, because there's probably people who could do what I'm doing better. Like, is there any kind of advice to founders who are trying to take their roles off their plate and build them into actual independent roles inside their company, like to not fall into that trap, to just basically look for like your same qualities in somebody.
It's a cool question, and I'd love to make it even more specific. So what roles or what?
Well, like an operations manager is our next hire. So really like kind of taking the day-to-day ops off of me. And that's just a role that we've ran through some people that we think is a good fit, but I just haven't really been able to fall in love with anybody.
It'd be hard in the limited time we have to know that I've accurately helped you diagnose why you're not falling in love with someone. You could have standards that are too high. You could not be an issue at all. I do think that there is a common experience, not universal, but it's pretty normal experience for a certain type of founder to almost be eternally disappointed because they have such high specific expectations on any role that they once owned. So really all they want is someone who would replicate exactly what they do. The problem with that is really capable people don't want that level of either micromanagement or control. They want autonomy. They want the ability to be creative, to sort of have exactly what that person wants. They want the ability to have it done their way and figure out the best way to do something. So I would examine that. I would at least examine, is this me or partly me, or the way in which I want to, control or own, and is that going to actually serve me in the organization? But let's assume that's not a thing for you, and that's not what's going on here. All I would say is, going back to my know what you want or know that you don't know what you want, one other thesis would be you don't know what you want yet. And so there could be a question about, does this person fill an existing need that's very tactical? And really the benefit here, the problem being solved, is it frees up my time to go and do other things? And fair enough if so. Or is it, I'm looking for someone who can both do that today and scale and continue to own this so that this stuff doesn't bleed back onto my plate? So there's actually more seniority here, more expertise here, more capability here. But let me pause, having rapid fired all that at you, and quickly check with you. Are there any of those threads that sound interesting or you want to follow a little bit?
Yeah, I think I would love to. I'm actually running a few minutes late for a 4:00 call that I mistakenly scheduled because I thought everything was going to end at 4. But I'll, if it's cool with you, maybe I'll shoot you an email or something.
Please do. It's jonathan.basker@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to talk about this. Absolutely.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
I was going to say to Cameron real quick, feel free to join. I'll be starting a small Discord as part of our community Discord for founders to chat, and we'll be happy to follow on those ones. And to Brandon, I've actually been starting to focus more on the growth salespeople hiring, and we've spent 2019 building and mostly engineering hiring. So coming from engineering background myself, to me, it's like comes easier than sales. So happy to collaborate and exchange notes on how to better hire sales folks, and I'm happy to share how our experience been on working with on the engineering side.
Well, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
That's awesome. And a great point. Find people that are in your world that know the things that you don't know, and create that value exchange. Absolutely. Is this a useful format so far?
Super awesome. I had a few follow-up questions. I've kind of like naturally got to the point of, structuring my interviews as mutual discovery, having a kind of like a chaotic process. Now thinking through what would be a great way to start structuring it a little bit better. If there's any tools on the taking notes, or like making sure that the process is a little bit more organized, because I'm scattered between Quip, Notion, and some other documents as far as like where I keep those things. Starting to get more organized about job postings and other things. Again, have been historically just snoozing on that problem and basically hiring as we need through friends of friends, and that's worked out well, but doesn't scale beyond that, and I don't think picks up the best talent available. So
I am a tremendously disorganized person, and if there's one of all of those things, if there's one thing I would always make sure I keep organized, and one thing that'll matter the most to keep clean, it is, it looks like we got 5 minutes left. It is the tracker that you're using to track who you're talking to, who you have talked to, and where they all are in the process. It's so easy and so tragic. Everyone learns this lesson eventually the hard way. You get so busy in life and you come back and you're like, oh, right, Matt was awesome. And you say hi to Matt, and Matt just took a different job. And nothing stole that hire from you except you and being too busy. And I have felt that pain, and it is a hard and shit lesson to learn, but rather than learning it. I would say if you don't have a natural sense of organization, and it takes active effort to focus or to yourself to organize yourself, the place I would expend that energy is in a spreadsheet somewhere. If you don't have an ATS, if you're too early for that, just create a Google Drive like form, or not form, but Excel thing, and track everyone's name. You just need like name, a notes field, last point of contact, and next steps. Now, there's better ways to design it than that, but you might as well do that. You might also want to include a sort of urgency or excitedness scale.
It's the same for fundraising, honestly. Like that's the part where I'm like, because I've been trying to get more organized on the fundraising front, and I keep trying not to fundraise, but then I keep going back to fundraising, and I actually think it's a great practice for both sales and narrative shaping, and just keep doing it, and relationship building. A lot of these things are so over time. But it's the same problem. So I'm like, we need a better way to, if I solve better tracking of investors and hiring, that's like all the things that are going to matter for the company for quite a long while. So,
well, and I don't track this stuff anymore, but I know there's a lot of like personal CMS tools that have come up, and they're probably very appropriate for this. Also, to your point about efficiency or what you can do as you try and standardize. Here's one really important thing that most people don't get initially. There's generally some standard flow to an interview, and it looks like there's an initial conversation and a screen. And then we get into some body of the interview, and then there's a final conversation, and then I try and hire you, or I don't, or things drop off along the way. You can get really clever and creative with, hacking or changing or adjusting that process flow, but why? I mean, you don't need to at this point. What I would say, going back to this concept of brute force intelligently applied, is be very thoughtful about where all your time is going in that funnel and whether or not it's being used wisely. And I'll point out what I think is the most common misuse of time, which is a wide, easy to pass through screen. It's hard, especially this early stage. It's very hard to screen for a few reasons. One, generally, they don't give a shit about you yet. So, going back to my first point, you're trying to craft and share this narrative and create rapport, which is so important in this process. The most important moment to do all those things is the first time you meet someone. You're setting the tone. That can blunt or limit your ability to dig in deep with them and start screening the hell out of them. So I'll give you guys a few things that I think could be helpful. First, try and spend the most time on the people that look best on paper. Once you have them, make sure that the first thing you do is create rapport. And once you have rapport, ask for permission to shift into more of an interview mode. Yuri, I'm super excited about this. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. So far, it's been a delight. I would like to move us into more of a sort of classic interview where we both get to discover, we're almost out of time.